And now, an exclusive sneak preview of a recent X-Talks webinar, How to Accelerate Lupus Solutions with RWD.
We're now going to be starting with an overview of lupus as a disease, and really Dr. Katz will be taking us through this important topic. Dr. Katz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fred. And thank you, everyone, for your attendance today. First of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about lupus. Lupus is a multi-system disease. It can affect almost every organ system in the body. Within 5 years of diagnosis, up to 50% of people will experience some organ damage. And as time progresses, the disease damage can accumulate. The primary age of onset is young adulthood. Disease severity, presentation, and course can vary considerably. Some people may never have any symptoms that are greater than a rash or arthritis. For others, their first symptom may be renal crisis. Lupus disproportionately affects women and non-white populations. The female-male ratio is about 9:1. Slide. Lupus is notoriously difficult to diagnose. You can see here that about a third of people who have lupus, it takes up to more than 5 years for them to receive their diagnosis. And about half of people with lupus, it takes at least 3 years for the diagnosis. And that means they're also having a delay in treatment. Slide. Goals for treating lupus are, first of all, to control disease activity. Ultimately, the goal would be to achieve remission or low disease activity, prevent flares which lead to organ damage, optimize quality of life for people with lupus, and also to minimize exposure to glucocorticoids and the toxicity that is associated with those agents. Slide. The difficulty is, though, that until 2011, there had only been 3 medications that were FDA approved for lupus: aspirin, glucocorticoids, and hydroxychloroquine. In 2011, belimumab was approved, and then a decade later, voclosporin was approved for lupus nephritis, and then a year later, anifrolumab. In spite of having these wonderful new treatments available, the majority of people with lupus are not taking these medications. But these new medications have made the prospect of disease modification at least a thought. So this is an emerging concept in lupus. We talk about this in other rheumatic conditions like RA. We have things that we call DMARDs, or disease-modifying agents. And the goal there would be to minimize disease activity with the fewest possible treatment-associated toxicities and damage, and also to slow and prevent organ damage or progression to end-stage disease. Slide. So I want to talk a little bit about social determinants of health because they play such a large role in lupus. In the next slide, this is just to give you an idea of the disparities in prevalence. This slide shows data from combined data from 4 population-based lupus registries. And if you look at the 2 slides that are the 2 graphs on the right side here, the top, the orange graph is females. And the top 2 rows are American Indian and Alaska Natives and Black patients, and you can see that the prevalence is much higher than it is in the white group. And Hispanics are also overrepresented in the prevalence. In the blue graph below, you can see the same pattern for men. The other thing you can see here is the higher prevalence in women than in men. Next slide, please. Disparities in the severity of lupus and lupus outcomes have been studied for quite some time. And this is just an example from 1997 that is looking at the association of socioeconomic status or poverty with lupus disease severity, and they showed that there was a significant relationship between lower income and disease outcomes. Next slide, please. And then in 2023, this review was published that tried to summarize a lot of the data that had been published on disparities and social determinants of health and lupus. Most of the research has focused on income and education, and those two factors are associated with a wide range of poor outcomes in lupus. So worse disease activity, more disease damage, mortality, poor function, lack of referrals, poor medication adherence, missed appointments, all sorts of bad outcomes. More recent research has examined some other social determinants such as racial discrimination and stress, rural residents and the travel burden to receive care because lupus specialists are few, health literacy, economic insecurities beyond poverty, neighborhood characteristics, those are all associated with poor outcomes. There's also an association of race and ethnicity with poor outcomes, with the thought that at least some of that is happens because of there is a lower quality of care, fewer referrals for people of non-white race and ethnicity.
To view the entirety of this webinar, visit the link in the description and register on xtalks.com completely free of charge.